Good morning, America. Welcome to Taxes Made Easy. We've got a very interesting program today. We're going to be focusing on the CTA. So it's the Corporate Transparency Act. If you haven't heard about it and you're a small business owner, you need to know about this. This is something that a regulation recently passed by the Biden administration. And again, it's got some pretty nasty penalties attached to it. And so it's a reporting requirement. As long as you report, and the level of reporting that's required is pretty scary too. So we're going to dive deep into that today. There's a lot of news to cover, some very important things that can affect you and your business and your family. So please just stick with us. Any questions you have, just give us a call. But we're going to be right back after this short break. So stay tuned. Welcome back, everybody, at Taxes Made Easy. Thank you for watching live or on rebroadcast, wherever you might be. Got a lot of interesting topics to cover, and the first one is really going to affect people in the tri-state area, New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, a lot of those areas. And this is really talking about bigger states grabbing more than their fair share of income taxes and hurting taxpayers along the way. So this is from the Associated Press. The title is New Jersey is actually motivating people to go to court against New York and appeal their tax bills. And other states are doing the same thing. So they're motivating people by offering rebates. So you can actually save money. And New Jersey is saying, hey, there's no reason to be paying New York taxes. You could be paying lower amounts in New Jersey, not by much, but lower taxes in New Jersey. Would rather see that money taxed in their state rather than New York. So where are most of the jobs still? New York City. But it's insane to try to commute in there. So telecommuting, working remotely is definitely a new thing today. And if people aren't traveling to New York, they're not living there, they're not spending their time there, they're wondering, why are we paying income tax to New York City? And a lot of their home states, New Jersey, Connecticut, and this happens in other areas as well. Connecticut and Massachusetts have a similar tussle going on. So New Jersey is offering a rebate worth half of a person's refund of income. So this is what they're trying to pass, New Jersey. So it's and they're hoping they'll get this through. Well, it's already being offered. Sorry, for taxes for 2020 through 2023, and so one person already contested their issue with New York, won, and got a $7,797 refund for their efforts and got the rebate. So they're saying, hey, if you contest being charged New York taxes when you're not living in the state, you're not working in the state, you're working remotely, they're offering you a rebate to help you, and as the carrot to say, hey, pay taxes here instead of New York. So New York requires out-of-state commuters to still pay New York taxes unless they can satisfy very strict requirements for what constitutes a bona fide home office. So this is really what you have to show, is that there's a bona fide home office. It needs to be near specialized track to test new. This is an example of one thing that could qualify. So a work with specialized equipment that could be duplicated over the border would still have to pay. Basically, New York is very, very aggressive about this, and New Jersey hasn't really fought back on this. So when everything changed in 2020, New York should have changed those rules with the change in reality. They didn't. They're still fighting for these, but no neighboring states, Connecticut, New Jersey are fighting back and saying, look, this isn't right, and trying to get the funds back from this. So as you go through this article, it's an interesting article. We're going to post on it. And it even talks about Edward Zielinski, who is a Connecticut tax law expert and professor at Yeshiva University. And again, this is usually targeting and hurting the middle class, because the middle class doesn't have the funds to go and contest these and say this isn't right. They don't have, it's usually not worth hiring a bunch of attorneys to go and fight this, but there are attorneys out there going out there contesting this. So if you live in the tri-state area, and again, there's other areas that do this as well, Arkansas, Delaware, Nebraska, Pennsylvania, all have similar rules to New York's, but more and more, these are being challenged in court. They're challenging these, saying, look, this isn't fair, this isn't just, and some people are winning. New York's going to fight this. So be aware that they're going to fight this, but again, very interesting comment here by Andrew Sidamon Aristov, who was the New Jersey State Treasurer and former New York Commissioner of Tax, believes it's just going to matter of time before the right person gets before the court and challenges it, before these overreaching, New York so desperate for money right now. It's just, and they've always been like that, but they could get away with it before everybody was commuting. But it doesn't make a lot of sense to tax people that don't work in the state, have little to no connection to the state. California is very similar to that, where they will tax income that has any connection to the state as well, which hurts people across the country paying higher tax rates. Speaking of California, we're going to jump to this next article, and this one is from Fox News. This is California and New York. They're losing people like crazy. High tax rates, high issues, and they're thinking about how do they discourage people from fleeing the state, but also tax them on their way out too. So this is really going to blow your mind, what some of these blue states are thinking about and mulling and trying to put into place. So they feel justified here. How dare people leave this very expensive state that's going crazy? So this is called an exit tax, and it happens not when you leave the country, but when you move from the state of California or New York, if they do it. They have the highest state income tax in the country at 13.3%. And we talked about how they don't tax services the other day, but their overall rate is the highest in the country. And that's why people are moving. Nevada, right next door, has no income tax. Property taxes are high, but overall, you end up paying a lot less. Florida, Texas, some of the big states with no state income tax. So they already have a special tax called mansion taxes if people sell large properties and try to move out of the state. But it's only driving more and more people out to get out and escape California. So what is this exit tax, and how would it survive? What it is they're planning, and this is where it gets into the details, this is what it is. They're going to tax 0.4% of an individual's net worth over $30 million, $15 million if you're married, filing single. So it's, again, designed to attack the wealthiest people, but to do it for up to 10 years after they leave the state. I don't think this would pass constitutional muster, but the problem is states like New York, states like California, they overreach all the time. And they force people to take it through the courts. Someone has to have the finances and the money, and it's got to be hurting them bad enough to sue them and take it all the way through the court system to have this overturned as unconstitutional. So, and in the meantime, they'll bring in plenty of money to try to stem the huge gaps in their own budget. We've talked about that. So not only it sounds like doesn't sound like a lot, but 0.4% of net worth. And there's another kicker. It's not how much you earned in the year. It's like, okay, what's your total worth? Doesn't matter if you have it invested. Doesn't matter if you have it a company and you don't have the cash flow. We want you to pay a tax and punish you for leaving the state for 10 years if you decide to leave. That is unheard of. I've never heard of a tax like that. And again, there's a right to travel. There's plenty of major constitutional issues with this. And so California has a lot to lose by this, which is why they're taking some pretty extreme measures here. But the problem is a lot of people, again, here's an example. If you have a $40 million business, no other assets, you're going to have to downsize your business, sell off part of the business just to pay taxes to California when you have no connection to the state anymore because you left. So I mean, these are ideas that have been thrown out there. Instead of getting their spending under control and figuring things out, this is where California, New York, and other large liberal states that are hemorrhaging people, especially the wealthy, are trying to recoup some of these losses. But in my personal opinion, a lot of these are unconstitutional. And again, it violates people's rights. But to get that heard in court is long, it's expensive, and could cause a lot of problems. So when we talk about taxes hitting individuals, taxes, and this kind of the theme for today is that larger governments overreaching and trying to affect people that are either left the state or affect, and when we get to the federal article, it's going to be the federal government overreaching to affect small and large businesses across the country. There's one last article I want to focus on. And I thought I was sharing. I guess I lost that. And we're going to have to get to this. And we're going to shift to the federal government and how they're affecting businesses. So let's go ahead and get that share up. You know what? Actually, we have about 30 seconds left. So I'm just going to preface it for now and then jump to the article. This is from the Federal Trade Commission. So again, we have a 3-2 vote. So very narrowly approved this to ban non-compete agreements. So this will affect employees as well as employers. So this is definitely favors employees. This is something that's out there where it affects businesses, but again, we're up to this heartbreak. So we'll jump into it right when we come back. Welcome back, everybody, here at Taxes Made Easy. Thank you again for watching. So we were just wrapping up talking about California trying to tax people for leaving the state for up to 10 years afterwards, and that's quite the stretch. I do think eventually they'll be struck down by the courts, but again, it's going to hurt businesses. It's going to hurt business owners trying to move to more competitive states as California. Their laws get crazier and crazier. So honestly, if they do pass something like this, I think before it goes into effect, people are going to flee like crazy, and it's going to create a mass exodus before this law goes into effect. People on the fence about whether or not to leave will probably decide to leave sooner, which ironically only hurts Californians. It's a beautiful state. Just that the budget, the politics of it is just so wonky, and it's hurting so many people. It's really sad to see the homeless issues affecting California. We mentioned that I don't know if I mentioned that article or not, but there was a $20 billion spent on homeless issues and no progress as a result. So we're going to switch gears a little bit. Now we're going to talk about the federal government. This is where we're going to go pretty much for the rest of the session. Not talking about the states overreaching, but the federal government. And there's two new things that have come out. The first one, let me see, grab it. This is a little different, so hold on, let me see. Here we go. Federal Trade Commission, and I was introducing this right as I ran out of time, votes to ban non-compete agreements. So what is a non-compete agreement? It's pretty much when you hire someone on as part of their employment contract, the employer throws in a clause saying, look, if you do leave the company, we don't want you to compete directly from us. Take our trade secrets, the knowledge of how we run our business, and immediately go over to a competitor and share all of that, because that hurts the original company. There are a lot of valid reasons to have non-compete agreements, and it's usually more valid the higher up you are in a company. Generally, they're disfavored by most courts, so even though a lot of companies have them, they're hard to enforce. Very typical thing, though, is if, and I had this where I left a company and stealing clients. So even without a non-compete agreement, that's going to be a very tricky thing. And if you do that, be careful about taking clients with you unless they are loyal to you and not the other company. I mean, there's a lot of legal landmines there. So it becomes a very tricky issue. So they pass this ban on non-compete agreements. It's going to the courts. It's already been litigated in the courts. Does the Federal Trade Commission, does the federal government have the right to infringe on contracts and tell people what they can and can't put in an employment contract? So again, that's, the federal government reaching further than they have before. But why would they do this? So again, the article goes into, yes, it's a Democrat majority, but what the rule actually does, and this is, again, it's been put into place for now. It's being litigated. They've already filed lawsuits against it. But existing non-competes, so basically prohibits any new non-compete agreements. And the new rule would ban new non-competes for all workers, including senior executives, as an unfair competitive practice. So the issue here is, even if you have a senior employee that knows intimately the workings of your business, knows how what's making your company successful, they can take that to a new company and immediately start competing with you without any legally they can do it. There's nothing that the former employer could do. Now, existing non-compete agreements, they're not going to just invalidate everything that's already in place, but only for senior executives. So if you have a senior executive, a policy-making, and that's defined as a policy-making position, who earns over $151,000 annually, they can remain in effect for senior non-executives for non-compete agreements are signed prior to the law. Non-compete agreements for anybody else would be made invalid. So it's on one hand, it's generally recognized that non-compete agreements aren't generally enforceable. Half the time you have to track your employees and see where they go and see if they move directly to a competitor. And you would have to argue that, look, I trained this person, I got them up to position, and that's a problem for businesses. And I've seen that in my own business, that it takes months. Really, it takes me 6 to 9 months to really train someone and get them to a point where they are truly valuable for my company. And I'm talking most positions, but especially for attorneys. I hire an attorney, I train them, I get them placed, and we haven't seen this too much for this reason, but for other, it's hard to find good people right now. It really is. And when you find someone, you get them trained up and make them, all of a sudden now they're becoming very productive. They're getting where they're hitting their stride, and then someone comes along and offers them a better deal. That hurts a company, and it hurts it bad, because then you have to go through the hiring process for someone else. You have to go through the training period and wait that 6 to 9 months before they truly become productive. And so this having invalidated non-compete agreements across the board, it makes it that much harder for businesses to keep and retain talent and to recoup everything that they poured into a new employee. So the chambers of commerce are the main ones behind this, fighting this new rule, but they arguments for getting rid of non-competes is that they do keep wages low. Why? Because it's harder to poach people if they have a non-compete clause. They say it suppresses new ideas, robs the American economy of dynamism, and they're saying that you would have a lot of new startup companies once you get rid of non-competes. However, that's one perspective. The argument from the other side is that you're killing small businesses. That small businesses that start up, they start with their core group of people, they train them up, and who has the money to hire these people away and take the talent and that's been developed by small businesses? Corporate America. Larger corporations can absolutely poach talent away from smaller companies, and it hurts smaller companies. So that's really the other side of this, is that it's being opposed as the critical tool for companies to protect trade secrets and promote competitiveness between companies where they're actually competing, rather than, they have this guy that's really important, let's just offer him a lot more money and poach him away. So it can make it a lot more difficult for growing businesses with good ideas to thrive and protect what they built up in their company. So whether or not this will shake out, how it will actually affect the economy, this is pro-worker, definitely pro-worker. So I think it's hard to say, and it's not just always cut and dry. If it's pro-worker, that means it's bad for business. That's not exactly true. There are things that can be pro-worker and good for business. On this end, it's hard to. I'm kind of on the fence. I'm not sure if this would hurt businesses overall or help them. I know it will definitely probably help large corporations that have the money and the ability to poach talent away from small businesses that are building. Whether or not it will create a bunch of new businesses, because new businesses are the ones creating the talent, putting all the time and effort into this. I don't think it'll help small businesses. I think it's going to help corporate America. My personal opinion is I don't think it's going to add to a bunch of new businesses creating and starting up unless they just don't hire. As long as they don't, it just makes it that much harder for businesses to build up and keep their core and their most important employees. Now, there are non-competes that go too far. You can't, they say you can't just compete with me anywhere. And generally the courts disfavor them as it is. But having the federal government come out and just banning them altogether, I don't think it will survive the legal challenges. But again, just like the last case with California overreaching and trying to tax people for 10 years after they leave the state, here it's going to take time to work through the courts. It's going to take time to get a ruling as to whether or not they even have this kind of authority. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. Again, this is most people would argue this is another regulation hurting small businesses and promoting making it easier for workers to move around at the expense of small businesses. And here's the frustrating thing: is that small business is really the job creation. Small businesses create more jobs than corporations, hands down. Main Street America, new ideas, new concepts, they create more competition. So, in summary, I think this is going to help larger corporations. It might help individuals, employees that are not bound by non-compete agreements anymore. But I do see this hurting small business, helping larger corporations, and that's not good for Main Street America. It's not for the economy overall. So we're going to switch gears here and talk about this last. It's based on an article, but this is something that's been going on, and this has been in the news. I've mentioned it. I haven't really spent a whole session on it. And this is very true. This is from the Epic Times. And so this is small businesses fighting back against a new set of federal regulations that few have even heard of. So it is so important to get this out. This was passed, I believe, back in January. And what this is, it's a reporting requirement. So basically, this is it's called the Corporate Transparency Act. Corporate Transparency Act. If you haven't heard of it, you need to dig into this. Get informed. This comes from FinCEN, and it's interesting that FinCEN is set up to go after illicit use, combat money laundering, and its related crimes, including terrorism. It was mainly put into place to fight cartels, mafia, crime syndicates that would use, money overseas accounts to money launder, and a lot of these financial laws were passed originally. FBAR being the big one, going after overseas accounts, requiring that people report the money. As long as you report it, that's fine. But at least that's the number one thing illegal organizations don't want to do is report where their money is to the federal government. The problem is today it's being used to mainly go after everyday citizens. So this is a huge expansion of what's required of business owners, and this is, the cover for this. Again, at this point, they know it's going after average Americans. They know this is going to be a huge moneymaker for the IRS, but it's going to hurt individual Americans, large and small, and it now requires all new businesses to reveal what who are the beneficial owners within 90 days of formation. So, and this doesn't apply to just new businesses. From what I understand, it applies to older businesses as well. If you have a business, you need to be filing this Corporate Transparency Act. Talk to your CPA, talk to your tax preparer. It's a new thing, and you have until January 1st to comply. And who's a beneficial owner? And you have to reveal the personal information of any beneficial owner. And they might not have any financial investment. And it's caught a lot of small businesses by surprise. It's really broad in its scope. And so, and again, it's a new law. People are figuring it out. Lawsuits are already being filed against the CTA. So again, some people, there's a lawsuit in Alabama, only benefits the people in Alabama that were part of the suit. It wasn't a national ruling. And then Small Business Administration Michigan filed its own suit. So there's plenty of lawsuits flying around about this. If they're not successful, or even if they're not decided, you need to respond to this. You need to take care of this. And it's going to affect a lot of people, not just small businesses, what we consider small businesses owners. So Again, they say this group covers 32,000 small business associations in Michigan, small business owners, but there's plenty across the country that aren't included in this. And they don't think this, they think this overreach. The federal government should have limitations on their power. That's a very old argument that the courts have not exercised. But again, the problem is, does the Fourth Amendment mean anything? Can the IRS come in or the federal government come in and just demand information without any reason? So the Fourth Amendment protects people from unreasonable searches and seizures. And this is a huge grab of information for anybody connected to a business. So homeowners associations can be caught under this. And so again, it talks about homeowners associations. There's 750,000 community associations in the IRS. This group that they're trying to get their word out covers 46,000 of them. But there's going to be a lot of people not complying, and the penalties are, I believe, is $500 per day. So again, it's pretty scary what's happening here. It's being figured out. A lot of people are still, again, like it's brand new. They're trying to get the word out. If you don't know about this, you need to talk to your CPA. You need to talk to your tax preparer. Talk to a tax attorney and say, hey, what is this CTA, this new regulation to report? So we're coming up on another break here in just about a minute, but we're going to dive into some of the penalties. We're going to dive into how this can affect you and how do you prepare for 2024? Because these are huge issues out there. These are huge issues that are going to affect people and individuals. So you don't have to own a small business. If you're on the board or connected to other associations, this law is very, very broad. And that's the concern, that a lot of people that don't want to share this information or aren't even aware of it are going to get hit with these penalties. And it's going to hurt Americans all across the board. So stay tuned. We're going to come back in just a few minutes and dive more into the CTA and why you need to be concerned about it and deal with this head on. Again, January 1st is the deadline, but this is, I believe it's going to be turning into a yearly reporting requirement. So again, we'll be right back after this short break to dive into the CTA more. Welcome back, for everybody. We're talking about the Corporate Transparency Act, and I apologize. That probably gives you gray hairs just hearing that. It just sounds horrible. It's a CTA for short. Again, we were focusing on this article from the Epic Times about some of these things. So to clarify it, we have another article information that we're going to go over. But real quick, I want to touch on the penalties for this. It's $500 per day penalty up to $10,000 and possible criminal penalties for non-compliance as well. So again, this is not something to play with. This is something that's going to hurt small businesses, organizations across the country. And how do you know? I mean, that's the thing. It's so broad. We're going to jump to another article here that touches on how broad it is and how to be aware of this. And this is from an article from Wolters Kluwer. They have a lot of very helpful articles here. And again, they're getting the best information they have out there. It's a new law. People are still figuring this out. Whether or not it's going to survive in the courts is something to be very aware of. So newly established and existing businesses have to file, and they really break it down. So when you create a business, you have 90 days to report it. So as soon as you get that information that your company has been created with the Secretary of State, you have to send that in. And then, so limited liability companies, corporations, other entities, Again, they have a handy quiz here to go through and see if it applies to you or your organization or not. So just because you're not a business in the traditional sense, don't assume that you don't have to comply with this. And again, the penalties are pretty hefty. What is being reported? They have to. I'm going to jump to this because this is where it gets a little scary. Well, this is not very helpful. You have to. It's their passport information, their driver's license information. There's a lot of very personal information that has to be reported, and it's for a beneficial owner who exercises substantial control, or, and this or is very important. So if you exercise substantial control or has control of at least 25% of ownership interests, and there's no maximum limit on the number of beneficial owners. So the failure to file these penalties, again, it's the owners that are required to file this, or the reporting companies are required to file this. It's kind of yet to be seen. Are they going to attach this to each company or to each owner? So again, it's the company applicant. So it's a company, but again, it refers to the individual who files the document to create the company. If you have an existing company, you have to file by January 1st, 2025. New companies, it has to be 90 calendar days from when it's created. Again, if there's any change of information, you have to update that within 30 days. So anytime anybody leaves, it's like the IRS is putting together, or the federal government is putting together a huge database of all business owners, all of their personal information. And so that's why people are really fighting this law. They're fighting this regulation and arguing that this is a huge search and seizure. They're claiming it's not made public because, the government is so good at protecting their information. And there are some exemptions, mainly for large publicly traded companies where it would be too unwieldy to reveal anybody that owns stock or has any kind of controlling interest. Other large companies. So again, there's 23 exemptions. It talks about there's hefty fines, criminal penalties, but it doesn't get into the key parts of that. So here's my concern. Talk to your CPA. Talk to your tax accountant. Ask about the CTA. Is this something I need to be concerned about? Have I reported on this personally? No, not yet. I'm hoping it gets struck down by the courts, but I have until January 25th. If you are a tax professional, if you're out there and helping people set up businesses, this is something to be very aware of. And while the word is getting out there, there's like I mentioned, there's going to be so many people that are going to get surprised and hurt by this new reporting requirement. And it requires a lot of personal information to be reported on this form and through this. So if you have questions, if you know somebody starting up a business, if you know someone, or if you own a business, or if you're part of an organization, you need to be asking these questions. You need to be asking, hey, how do I address this? This is scary. How do I get good information? Again, there's information on the internet available. If it's still valid or if it's been struck down in your area, initially, temporarily by a district court. Check with an attorney, get online, and get informed, because this is one of those things that's going to surprise people if you're not careful. So again, it's kind of scary to think that the federal government will have this database of all owners of every business or entity out there, anybody involved, like it talks about. This includes homeowners associations and other associations. So it's in businesses large and small. It's kind of interesting to see this and I think it's very big brotherish myself. So personally, I don't want to comply. I will if I have to by January 25th, but I'm going to be looking into exceptions and ways to hopefully have this overturned in the courts. So, but protect yourself. Be aware. So my number one theme for this week, coming out of since April 15th, is don't sit down and relax. Prepare. Get your books together. Get your questions answered. Make sure you're on top of your estimated tax payments. We talked about that in length earlier this week. Make sure that you're compliant with your filing requirements, your payment requirements, but also some of these new laws that are coming out. And if you have a taxpayer that isn't familiar with this, this is still very new information out there. Don't be surprised, but dig into it, find out, and especially if you know anybody creating new businesses, this is something to be aware of. So people get surprised by new information all the time. Get ahead of this. Again, and the hardest part is, people ask me all the time, what do I expect? What's going to happen? Just like with all this stuff going on with the SBA, these are things that are changing right now. And so it's hard to anticipate and guess. A lot of times attorneys are trying to make their best guess as to what's going to happen with these new rules, because it's an unstable situation. Even if bad laws, if they stay the same and they're not constantly changing the landscape, it's easier to plan. It's easier to make wise decisions moving forward when you have good information. And I bet there's a lot of business owners that if they go and create a business, if they have to report all their personal information and sensitive information to the federal government, are going to say, no, thank you, I'll do something else. So again, I guess the theme for today has been overreach by the government, state and federal, rightly or wrongly. I think it's really scary how they use laws to go after criminals and criminal organizations, and then they criminalize everyday citizens for just running a business, trying to support their family. And again, it's not just Democrats, even though the Democrats are currently in power, the Republicans love big government as well, far too often. And it hurts small businesses, it hurts families. It's today, Wednesday, yesterday, I went off on the change of allowables and how it's hurting small businesses, it's hurting the middle class. So make your voice heard, get out there and again, the changing how they're looking at inflation, which is a very nasty move by the government, is used to their benefit, but to hurt taxpayers across the board. So more than ever now, be aware of your rights, be aware of what's facing you. Just yesterday, I had someone whose business has declined. He's lost, instead of making about $7,000 a month, it's dropped down to around $5,000 a month. And so I went through the hardship negotiation yesterday with him, went over all of his financial information. And it was stunning to see how the new allowables are already in effect as of Monday this week. And to see how, if he would have had his income, if he wouldn't have lost his income from the previous year, he would have gone from qualifying for a hardship status to all of a sudden now the IRS is demanding $1,000 from him. Now, because his business is hurt and is suffering through the economy and he's making about 20% less, which is a huge loss, he still qualifies for a hardship status, but that's only because he's hurting that much more. So be aware of what your rights are, be aware of what your options are, and I think Americans are going to have to dig and scrape and look even harder and get more professional help to address these issues. So, they talked about making income taxes simpler, postcard size or whatever. A lot of people thought that was ridiculous. But overall, I think making government easier to understand, easier to work with, instead of more burdensome, should be a goal of government. Why people would have to go and fight New York to get an exemption and have New Jersey offering a rebate. Hey, we'll give you more money if you do this and you win in New York against New York. It's silly. It's ridiculous, and it just adds more burden on average taxpayers trying to get by and make a living and provide for their families and for their future. And that's not what government should be doing. Government should not be making it harder for your average citizen to survive, to get by. And again, the more paperwork people have to go through, the more non-compliance you're going to have. And unfortunately, the more people are going to need people like me to contest mountains of debt and additional balances. And again, it just increases the tax burden on everyday Americans. And that, to me, is a sad part. That's what I see day in and day out. Unfortunately, I have people that call almost every single day. Maybe not every day, but every week, 2 or 3 people call and they want pro bono services. And we do offer pro bono services, but we have to be limited on them. We can't take on, 20 clients every month that need pro bono work. It would put my business under. And the sad truth is that post-COVID, most of the free legal tax clinics have closed. I've toyed with the idea of trying to open one myself, but there's less help available to people out there. So get the free advice you can. Watch, again, there's plenty of information on our videos and blogs, and then other sites as well. If you have any questions, give us a call, 520-485-7371. You can send us an email at info@guardiantaxlaw.com. The email and response is free. We do free consultations. We never charge anybody until we see exactly what we can do and we can really help them out. And then you can always go to guardiantaxlaw.com, our website, or our YouTube channel, Facebook, and get more information, get informed. And again, the Corporate Transparency Act is something to be very aware of and deal with sooner rather than later. The Corporate Transparency Act. Talk to your CPA, talk to your tax preparer, go online, and again, all of these links and websites that we shared today will be posted and linked when these videos are uploaded to our YouTube channel. Again, Hubert Johnson with Guardian Tax Law. Glad to help you out. And it's Wednesday, halfway through the week. Again, if you have any questions, just give us a call. And I hope you have a great day. And we're going to be ending just a minute shy. But again, we're here to help and glad to help. So have a wonderful day, and we will see everybody tomorrow.